do
smile.
have little wool socks.
Like you're currently wearing those?
Yes.
I couldn't do it.
So we just need Barbara
And Athena.
and Athena. Well, they've probably gone off somewhere.
I can't reconcile mine
Don't think so.
With your brand?
yeah.
Face looks familiar.
I know.
I reflect that.
I don't like it.
I just reflect that.
Yeah.
We'll get started in just a minute. We need to wait for our board secretary and our board attorney.
I think Athena was okay with it.
Oh, mine sounds just like that.
I think Athena was okay with us starting, Betsy.
Okay.
She's going to come in after the audit report.
The board met tonight in executive session. We're now ready to start the public portion of our meeting. We had no written comment, communications rather, since our last meeting, which was January 4th. Before we start, as all of you probably know, we lost a student of ours, Nathan Latifi. And also earlier in November, we lost a former student, a 2022 graduate, Max Renteria. I would like to have a moment of silence, please, for both of those individuals. Okay, thank you. The president's report will be short. I just wanted, on behalf of my colleagues on the board, to thank our administrators and staff and our students for their care and concern for each other and for the greater Glenridge family during what has been a very difficult time for everyone. You cannot, nobody who hasn't been through it can imagine it, but our entire staff has been wonderful. And for those who were at the memorial service for Nathan yesterday, our students were absolutely amazing, just amazing. The way they've come together, their eloquence when talking about their classmate, and their poise and maturity and grace. I think we've seen so much grace in this period. It is just awe-inspiring. So thank you to all. The only other thing that I would mention is that we found out today that the governor's budget speech will be on the 21st of February, which means that we will receive our financial aid information from the state 48 hours after that. This is a little bit earlier than was anticipated, and that is a very good thing in terms of budget planning. Also, there is a bill that will be heard in the Assembly Education Committee on the elimination of the exit exam that 11th graders take, which is known as the GPA, rather confusing since Most of us think GPA stands for grade point average, but this is the graduation proficiency assessment. There is a bill that has been introduced that will be discussed that proposes the elimination not just of the GPA, which is the current high school exit exam, but of any high school exit exam. I think that New Jersey is one of only 9 states that still has a high school exit exam, so there's considerable interest in it and opinions on both sides of the issue. So that is sort of that is pending out there. And with that, I will turn it over to our superintendent.
Thank you. It has definitely been a trying week and a half for the Glen Ridge schools and community. Our thoughts, our prayers, our deepest condolences to the Latifi family. The Glen Ridge community seems to shine the brightest during these darkest moments. There's so many people I'd like to thank just for the support. The high school administration just has been unbelievable under Mr. Lawler's leadership in providing support to our students and staff. Heather Kobalinski, who's our student assistant counselor, just organized a lot of the counseling, a lot of the resource material for the staff and the parents that was sent out was her doing. So I'm very thankful to have her on staff. Our staff was just providing support, comfort to our students when they're dealing with their own feelings and emotional shock. And I give them a lot of credit for everything they've had to deal with, but also for just being a support for our students. Our community continuously reached out to the board, myself, to the high school administration, and just offered their assistance and condolences, and we truly appreciate that. And we're fortunate to have an affiliation with the Traumatic Loss Coalition, who really become the experts in these situations, and we relied on them to provide us extra counseling, but also to guide us through a lot of the process, and we appreciate being a part of that team. We understand that this is just the beginning of the grieving process for our students and staff, and we will continue to provide support in the upcoming days, weeks, and months. There's going to be a lot of big events in our students' life, and it will be a reminder whenever those events happen that Nathan is not present, and we know we're going to have to be strong for our students. With that said, we have 2 items on our my report today. The first is the financial audit for the 21-22 school year, and we're happy to have Kathy Mantell here to present the audit.
Thank you. My heart really does go out to the Glen Ridge community, these lovely people who are sitting behind me. I heard them talking about someone passing, and I did not know that it was a young life. So really wish you well with that loss. So I'll keep it together and talk to you about finances. It's very nice to be here every year and be able to go over the financial highlights for the year. And so we look at fund balance from last year to this year, keeping in mind that the last 3 years have been up and down throughout the pandemic. We serve quite a few number of schools, and I handle quite a few myself, and so I see everything along the gamut of what has occurred. But Glen Ridge is financially strong. Fund balance was up $1.4 million this year. And last year it wasn't up as much. It had to do with the pandemic, when you were spending money, when you weren't spending money, when certain initiatives were given up because school wasn't open. And so this is, you're still not out of it 100% to see what normal is anymore. So up $1.4 million, largely attributed to, but actually the unexpended balance of the budget was only $1.2 million. That's really not a large number. So I think that you're managing well. You budgeted $1.6 million of fund balance, and then you have prior year encumbrances that you liquidate, but the net was up $1.4 million. The other point I like to make with the board is how much fund balance you use each year to support your budget and your operations. So in 21-22, you used 1.6 million. In 22-23, you're using 1.6 million. And then as the numbers fell out for June of 22, you have 1,394,588 for 23-24. But that's pretty level from my point of view. The capital reserve during the year, you started with 1.5 million. You were able to deposit almost 900,000 to it. You withdrew by budget 192,000, and you ended the year with 2,246,000, which again is good. And then we talk with administration and we talk about where you are, and of course this was June. So since June, there was a budgeted withdrawal from capital reserve in 22-23, that was 1.350. And then there was a resolution in July to withdraw another 350. So that's 1.7 out of the 2.2. We have discussions all the time. Mrs. Murphy, Barbara, spends a lot of time analyzing everything. And so the other point that I want to bring out is that the state raised the unassigned fund balance from 2% to 4%. And so that has been in effect for June of 21 and June of 22. In June of 23, that's going to revert back to 2%. I have some school districts that aren't understanding that. They think they need to get rid of that money. You do not need to get rid of that money. What happens is when you have extra money, you are permitted to put it in capital reserve. And I say every year to my clients that having a capital reserve is very, very important because the budget cap is 2%, and trying to maintain buildings while you're operating on a 2% increase is very difficult. So anytime you can achieve savings and you're not spending your full budget, it's definitely good to put it in capital reserve account. And then in your capital projects fund, that's the residual on some of the projects that go beyond a year. You have one project with HVAC that has a $53,000 balance, and I'm pretty certain that that was encumbered as of June, so the purchase order was placed, and it was probably liquidated by now. Another aspect is the food service fund. So the rocky road throughout the pandemic. So in 2021, there really wasn't revenue in the food service fund. This year, it resumed. You went from $2,400 of revenue up to $500,000. And of course, the expenses were the same. Last year, they were $55,000. This year, they were $489,000. You netted a $12,000 increase. There are changes in fixed assets, the equipment in the cafeteria, that's valued at $62,442, and then the operating portion that you have for the food service account is $14,045. Do a very good job of managing that and making sure that you're solvent. And then the last piece of financial information that I like to share with you is the long-term liabilities of the school district. You have bonds outstanding from different referendum projects. That's currently balance of $21,718,000. You have compensated absences for unused sick and vacation time. It doesn't fluctuate much from year to year, and that's a little over $300,000. And then the net pension liability. It's the 8th year to record the net pension liability, and it has been decreasing over time. I don't know why that's happening. What happens is the state pension system is audited by KPMG, and they release that, they get information from an actuary, and KPMG audits it, and we're given certain information. We have to make calculations. We have to test some of that data, and pretty much we include it in the footnotes to the financial statements for the district. Doesn't affect your operations. It's a very long-term liability. And then I like to reiterate each year that we're not only doing an audit of the financial statements to make sure that the financial picture is accurately reflected, but we're also doing a lot of compliance with NJDOE regulations. And then with the COVID grants, a lot of districts who never had a single audit had a single audit. So when you spend $750,000 on federal grants and or state grants, you have a federal and or state single audit. Glen Ridge had both. They provide compliance supplements. They're not as extensive as if they came out and did monitoring, but they are compliance procedures that we need to apply. And through all of those 3 phases, financial, compliance, and single audit, the district has no audit recommendations. And again, I will say why. I see your business administrator at meetings all the time, learning, understanding. We're out there all the time, paying attention, holding programs, making sure we all know what we need to know and do it to the best of our ability. So I would say that is the reason why. Another thing that I say is the tone in the district starts here at the top. It always starts at the top. You set the tone for the people, and you really do have a wonderful team here. So kudos to you. And with that, I have no further comments. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say or ask me, I'd be happy
Okay,
to answer.
what we'll do, thank you, Kathy. Board members, you can ask questions first, and then we'll upend our normal order because Ms. Mantell has a time schedule and take questions from the audience. So first, board members, questions.
No, I would just congratulate and thank Barbara for another successful audit. No findings, no recommendations. Always a great thing. That doesn't happen in every town. We're very lucky to have her for these years that we've had her, and she's great for us to work with as well. It's great to hear that she's great to work with for you.
Indeed.
So thanks again, Barbara.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, now we will have questions from the audience, if there are any, to Ms. Mantell, focused on the audit or questions about the audit. Please keep your questions to 2 minutes. Are there any questions on the audit? Don't appear to be. Kathy, thank you again. Thank you for your continuous work with Barbara at a very complicated time between federal grants and the change in the capital reserve amount and all the sort of changing financial landscape. Through it all, you and Barbara, especially Barbara, have brought us through. Thank you.
Thank you. My second part of Superintendent's report is a short presentation on the Start Strong assessment that we took in the fall, early in the fall. Just to give you a background of this Start Strong. This test assessment was developed by the state in order to meet a federal mandated testing. Typically, we take the New Jersey's student learning assessments. Because of the pandemic, we didn't take them 1 year. The state petitioned the federal government to put this in place. Instead, the federal government accepted it. We thought this was going to be a 1-year test, one and done, but the state decided to bring it back for year 2 this fall. So we administered the Start Strong overview. We don't know the status at this point if it will be back next school year. We're still waiting for the state to decide that. The test is for students in grades 4 through 8 for the language arts. For mathematics, it's grades 4 through 8, and algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2. For science, they are testing at grades 6, 9, and 12. This is a shorter exam. We don't get a lot of information back from the state on the result of these tests. The testing reports we get back for the NJSLA is more extensive. It is a longer test. It tests more standards than the Start Strong exam. So we're taking this with a little grain of salt as we look at the results. As you can see, with the ELA, there's only 10 questions. Mathematics, there's between 20 to 24 questions. The state has not in the last 2 years released state data on Start Strong. And New Jersey State Student Learning Assessment will have 5 different levels. A student, based on their scores, will be on one of those 5 levels. This assessment only has 3 levels. and they're listed up there. So as we look at the results for the students in Ridgewood Avenue School, what I'd probably be looking at, as I do with the NJSLA, is really how our students are performing at the top level. Do we have a majority of our students there? Typically, I will look for our students on the NJSLA to be somewhere around the 70-75% of our students performing in that area. Our students have performed well on this. You can see we're almost above 60 at every level, 3. We're seeing a little dip in grade 4 mathematics. But overall, when I start comparing similar districts, and that takes a little bit of searching, and not every district has presented their strong results, you're going to find that districts similar to us were within that same range that they're performing at. Our high school students, again, our LA scores are pretty strong. If we're looking at our level 3, our mathematics, we're going to notice some higher level scores, but then as we get that grade 8, I always need to explain that. Our grade 8's math scores are always lower because it's content test. So roughly about half of our 8th graders, our higher achieving 8th graders, are taking Algebra 1. So about the upper portion of our 8th graders are not taking the 8th grade exam. So you're going to see results that are not as high because you remove the top portion of those students, and they're in the Algebra 1 category. But those are numbers, again, that I'd like to see a little bit higher, and something that we'll look at. But when we do compare it to our NJSLA scores, again, which has a longer, more extensive test, we do perform a little bit better on our NJSLA assessment. And our science scores in grades 6, 9, and 12, we're going to be looking at that grade 9 a little bit more extensively, being at 31%. That's something that that we'll have to take an in-depth look at, and we'll see when we have the end of the year test on NJSLA for science if they're correlating or not. Typically, it's a little frustrating when you can't see how the state is performing on these tests. Is this a flaw in the design of the test, or is this a problem within our own school system that we need to delve into a little bit more? When we start looking at our students and the ones who are not performing well, we want to make sure we have programs in place. And this is not an exhaustive list, but certainly a pretty long list of interventions we have, whether it's programs we offer before and after school, homework, enrichment programs during school, whether it's in reading enrichment, basic skills in math. We have individuals that help enhance our programs. We have academic interventionists. We have a supervisor for the first time this year that's really beefing up our intervention programs. We have literacy consultants that we're working with. We've sent all our teachers to be trained through Conquer Math. So we have programs, we have professional development, we have alternative programs that could happen through our child study team or intervention and referral services programs. We're constantly looking at our assessment data, whether it's Start Strong, NJSLA, NJGPA, DRA, MAP, COGAT, to see our areas of weaknesses and strengths and to address that as needed. And we also want to recognize it's not just always about academics, but there is a social emotional component that we want to make sure that students are prepared to be in the classroom and can operate effectively. So we have plenty of SEL programs, or character recognition programs. Last meeting, Dr. Harris spoke about some things they were doing at Central. Essential School Solutions is another program that are addressing some of the students' behavior and emotional issues, which will affect their academic performance. So there's a lot that we're doing to make sure our students are in the best position to get a quality education. I do want to remind everyone we do continue to have events going on in this district. It slows down a little bit in the winter. Usually after February break, we'll be picking up. But later this week, we have the middle school, high school winter concert. Science fair start in early February at Linden. And we start getting to our transition nights as we get our 8th to 9th grade parents coming up for an orientation. We'll have our, soon afterwards, our 6th grade parents coming up to 7th for orientation. And then our 2nd grade parents going into Ridgewood Avenue. They're having their orientation probably around in May. And we'll be in May also offering our pre-K and K orientation. And that's my report for tonight.
Thank you. Now we've come to the first public comment period for questions or comments on agenda items only. For those of you who are not familiar with our protocols, you step up to the lectern, sign in, tell us your name, confirm your Glen Ridge residence. If you're affiliated with any group, let us know about that. You have 2 minutes, and if you have several comments or questions, please state them all at once so that we can try to answer them in the order that you gave them. Dave Campbell, will you be my timer?
Betsy, can I ask 2 questions before we open it
Oh,
up?
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Board members, questions first,
Thanks.
then we'll get to the public.
I just want to confirm that for the Start Strong, all you get from the state is our results. You don't get the state averages, you don't get any benchmarks to look at from other districts. Anything you have is you've called up your friends and said, what have you got?
Correct. Not only that, the state doesn't even compile the data for the buildings. We have to go through and calculate how many students scored in each category.
Okay. And then for the Algebra 1, that does include the advanced 8th graders,
Correct,
but
it
also
does.
the 9th graders, and that was also kind of low.
Correct.
For the,
That's
okay.
something we're.
I think Deputy Commissioner Jordan Schiff gave a presentation to the State Board the first week, the second week in January, but I don't believe that's been released to the schools yet.
No.
And that presentation, I think, showed uneven results. Not always what people would expect, but still left the districts in suspense. Any other questions from the board before we move into public comment? Okay. Now it's time for public comment. And David, are you okay with doing the timing? Thank you. Does anyone have a question or comment for us?
My name is Darius Tanad. I just had a question on agenda item, or a comment/question item.
I think the microphone's a little low for you.
Sorry.
If there,
A comment
thank you.
slash question on agenda item B6, the Linden Playground Grant. So at the Linden, the Homeschool Association meeting 2 weeks back, there was a long conversation regarding the playground, and actually the group was actually starting to try to formulate fundraising plans to replace components and to build greater play space. So it was actually a surprise to see that we could potentially get this grant money. So the question slash comment to the board is, do you think we can get the full 150,000 grant money? And what's the criteria for the grant money to be given, and the timeline for that grant money? So the group can work on the fundraising plans that they have.
Thank you. I know that the grant came up rather suddenly. Yes, Barbara?
Yeah,
And
so-
maybe you can elaborate a little bit
Sure.
if you don't mind.
So I believe it was Wednesday, I received an email from the county, the county business administrator letting us know about this grant. This is not like a typical grant from the Department of Education, which is usually the grants that we're used to dealing with. So it was something that was out there for public recreational facilities. So of course I knew that we were looking to do some work at Linden. So I thought, you know what, let's throw our hat in the ring for this. And I don't know if we're going to get
Yeah, so, you know, we got a quote, and I sent an inspection report, and I filled out the grant. So I really don't know if we're going to get it. I know there's $25 million, but it's not just for public schools, it's for the whole state. And they're guessing $100,000, but they're saying that could change per award. It could change depending on how many people apply. So that's kind of all the information that I have. But these kind of things, you just sort of like throw it out there and hope and cross your fingers and hope you get something back. So there's no guarantees.
So all fingers at Linden crossed, right?
Hi, Phil Johnson. It's kind of nice to be surrounded by books, but I'm actually not here to talk about books. I have not heard anything further about the ratification of the teacher's contract, if that has been voted on, if there are subsequent negotiations, and when the details of that contract may be shared with the public. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. The contract is scheduled, it needs to be ratified by the teachers union and then voted on by the Board of Ed. There was going to be a ratification presentation this past week, but because of the tragedy, it was delayed. So we can't really discuss the terms of the contract till it's signed, sealed, and delivered, but that is imminent. So hopefully by our next meeting, we will have it on our agenda to approve, all things being equal and going well. So at that time, we'll be able to talk about it. Thanks. Other questions or comments? All right. Continuing with our meeting, it is not the first meeting of the month, but some of us, we didn't have committee and liaison reports on the 4th. Does anyone have a committee or liaison report? Maybe we'll just go around, and I should say we should start with our student rep, Colin Pennington. He's on the end, and he's our student rep, which makes him unique.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things on behalf of the student council and the student body. First of all, our thoughts and prayers are with the Latifi family. It has been an extremely difficult time for everyone involved with the student body. We've been leaning on each other, and we really appreciate the support from the school and the community. It's been really great to see how such a tight-knit community in Glen Ridge has been able to come together surrounding these tragic events. And we also really appreciate all of the hard work that's been done by the administration, the staff, and especially all the teachers. And the fact that they've allowed us to move at our own pace, to come to terms with things, and we're setting our own schedule in that respect has been extremely helpful for us. And I'm also just going to say, Nathan Latifi, he was a lot of things. He was a star soccer player, a great friend to many, a son, a brother, but above all else, I think we've come to find that he was truly an integral part of the Glen Ridge community. So as we move forward, we're just going to try to live in a way that honors his legacy.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much. Okay, we can just go around and see if anybody has anything to report. Tricia, anything?
Nothing to report.
Okay, Heather.
The curriculum committee has not met yet.
All right, this is moving right along. Jocelyn.
Nothing to report.
All right, Duval.
No, nothing for me either.
Anthony.
Nothing to report, although I did have a question about the status of gym access. There was a meeting surrounding, and I couldn't make that meeting, but there was a meeting surrounding the access and issues surrounding, you know, the cost of providing extra hours.
Correct. There was a discussion about when our schools are not open, but we have to open them up to an outside group who should be covering the custodial cost. I told the group that I would bring this back to the policy committee which is meeting on Thursday, so there'll be a discussion at that committee meeting.
Thank you.
Tracy?
I have nothing to report.
All right. Well, I do have something to report because the Glen Ridge Diversity and Inclusion Association met earlier this month between our last meeting and this one, and they had asked a couple of questions. There was a concern about bullying and character development activities at Ridgewood Avenue School. So thanks to Mr. Phillips and the Ridgewood faculty, I was able to give them a list of both activities for the students and professional development for the faculty that center on bullying or actually bullying prevention and character development. They also asked about the new AAPI curricular elements and where we were in the process of integrating them into our curriculum. And again, thanks to Mr. Phillips, who told me that that was in process, but it really hasn't, it's still in the works, which is typical, I think, of incorporating any new curricular elements. And then they have been very busy. They talked about revitalizing their subcommittees in communications, events, just making their committee structure stronger. They talked about the MLK Day of Service, which now has happened at Tony's Kitchen, and the Lunar New Year celebration on January 28th at the Montclair Art Museum, which our GRDIA is going to have, I think, a booth or a table. It's on the 28th from 11 to 3. They encouraged everybody to attend. And that is the report from the Glen Ridge Diversity and Inclusion Association. Dave Campbell, do you have anything?
Yeah, the Finance and Facilities Committee met on Friday morning. If you've been following, and I encourage everyone to follow the budget calendar for the year, you see that today is the day when we have our audit, but also we just update the board on the status of the budget process. We're on schedule. This is the time of year when we're getting preliminary cost versus revenue numbers, and but we of course have no idea what state aid is going to be. So we're feeling around in the dark. From the schools, the wish lists have been gathered from the administrators as to potential improvements in services and stuff they need for next year. And this is the time when usually the gap is the widest between what we're going to make and what we're going to have to spend. But that always closes because it has to by the time the budget is finalized. So we're on schedule, and there's nothing exceptional to report. If anyone has any questions over the course of the next couple of weeks, Finance will probably meet again either prior to the next meeting or immediately after. So that is the January 24th report by Finance and Facilities.
Thank you. All right, you have in your packets minutes from the meeting of January 4th, regular session, and then the executive session, which was held after it. Does anyone have any additions or deletions from the minutes? Okay, that being the case, Tracy, would you move the minutes?
I move M1.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from David. Since there are no changes, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande,
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, David, would you move the administrative items?
I move A1 through A4.
All right. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Tracy. Any discussion before we call the roll? All right, Barbara?
Ms. Akinwande,
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
I for A1 to A3, abstaining from A4.
Ms. Graham,
I for A1 to A3 and also abstain on A4.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, Tracy, would you move the personnel items?
I move P1 through P9, which includes items for P4 on the addendum.
All right, may I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony. In keeping with our rules and the board members' code of ethics, we discuss personnel items in exec session. So that being the case, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande,
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Heather, would you move the curriculum items?
Sure. I move C1, the field trips listed below.
Okay, may I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Duval. Board members, any discussion on the curriculum items? Our robotics team is involved in a skirmish. Hopefully, it will be educational. That being the case, if there are no comments, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande,
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, before we move on the business items, I draw your attention to item B3, which is donations. We received some generous donations from Michael and Christina Elliott for both the Ridgewood Avenue School and the Central School. Donations of $150 and $300 with matching donations from the Black Baud Giving Fund. I thought at first this was a misprint, but there is a Black Baud Giving Fund. And then we received a donation, a generous donation from the Glen Ridge Educational Foundation to pay for the fall 2022 Innovation Mini Grants. The donation was for $14,780. So thank you to both the Elliots, the Black Baud Giving Fund, and also always to the foundation. We couldn't function as well as we do without them. And Tracy, I know you'll convey that to Mrs. Wong. Okay. All right, David, would you move the business items?
I move B1 through B9.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony. Any discussion on these business items? All right, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande,
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we've now reached the second public comment period for comments or questions on agenda items or other items pertaining to the running of the schools. The protocols are the same. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
This is just me. Darius Donat again. So just given the school budget considerations over the next few months, I just wanted the board to thoughtfully consider class size, particularly for current first and third graders, children who are still trying to catch up in school and still suffer from behavioral challenges due to the pandemic. So for this year, the kindergartners were given the 7th section, bringing their class size down from 18 to 16, but at the same time, first and third graders are in classes of 23, 24, and 25. And then on the further consideration is for Linden, each kindergarten class, they have one school aide compared to one aide shared across the 4 classrooms of first and second graders. So just for the sake of our children, teachers, and support staff, which is hoping the board would consider class size for those. And then just quickly, I just wanted the board to consider potentially for the second public comment period to make it 3 minutes or 4 minutes to accommodate people like me who stutter or who have trouble speaking. So not specifically special treatment for myself, just the broader community, just 1 or 2 more minutes for the second public comment period.
I think we have some latitude for people who suffer from whatever communication issues, so not to worry. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Moved by David Campbell. May I have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you all.